Josh has been leading sort of a committee that is looking at performance assessment, and you're about to watch us try out our calibration protocol that we devised at our meetings that hopefully, we hope will, align teachers across the building on common assessments, especially, so that we're all holding kids to the same standards in the same similar ways. Easier said than done. We have practiced this protocol once on a unit that I wrote, and we were pretty loosey-goosey about the protocol that day because we knew we were perfecting the protocol as we were working. But here we're going to try to stick to the protocol that I hope you all have a copy of.
Do you have extra copies? You want to make some more?
I'll make some more. It essentially is going to lead the teacher, let the teacher present the unit, and we're going to look at the unit materials as a committee and decide whether or not it looks like a viable unit. And then we'll go into kind of phase 2 and talk about student work that was produced, especially summatively by the unit. And we have had a chance in advance to look at the, in this case it's an essay about Lord of the Flies, Thomas Hobbes and Locke, John Locke, in advance, ungraded, electronic. Ms. Eldridge, Janice Eldridge, is going to bring the graded versions of the paper. I understand that those are first draft grades, and we have in some cases, another revision electronically.
Well, we have like packets that include all of their drafts, but the ones you have are the most the latest revision.
Anyway, during that second phase, we're going to talk about whether we see meets requirement in particular. We've been supplied good, very good, and meets papers, we hope. And we're going to decide whether or not we agree that the teacher is grading on a meets level in a way we want for, in this case, freshmen. Everybody has their materials, and we still don't have any.
You guys always do this after the unit has already been taught, or can you do this prior to the unit being taught?
We could do the first half of it prior.
Okay.
The second half is dependent on the student work.
Requires student work.
And the grant has allowed us to pay a teacher to do this unit and to pay them again with the student work. So we're trying to encourage, and I'm doing a workshop after break, trying to get lots of teachers to do units so that we start to accumulate a library of what work is really going on here. I'm just deciding whether or not to start without Amy, because I know she can jump in midstream.
I know that they have the time they have to be at lunch in an hour, I think, so we probably should get going, because this is going to take us.
Okay. Do we all agree that we should get going? Is Josh going to sit with us?
We probably should.
He's making pretty good.
In the closet?
No.
No, he's not? Okay.
I think just because I'm around you and I have a cold.
I don't hear well
Sit over on the side?
in general. So.
Side.
Who's going to be doing most of this?
The materials, and you're electronically able to get to those.
I didn't find the essay electronically.
They are on the site that
Are they on the site? It was
Josh
just on there.
shared with us
Yeah,
2 days ago.
if you go to,
The classroom performance assessment?
The grant site,
Yeah, I'm on the grid.
go over on the right.
materials, unit of study on the left, in blue. Yeah,
Yeah,
And then-
right there.
yeah, and then go over here to the right.
Down
teacher
here, okay, Lord of the
curriculum,
Flies.
and,
Okay, got it.
Okay. And thanks in advance to Janice Eldridge, who, along with Dina Hunter, is home with her new baby, or maybe home by now, for kind of putting yourself out there and creating some work. Okay. I'm going to put you on the clock, 5 to 7 minutes.
Okay. Well, this unit is for a brand new humanities class that we're offering at the high school. Our freshmen do not take a social studies class, and a lot of kids are upset about that. Our strong history kids don't like that they don't have a class that year. So what we decided to do is create a humanities class that would combine the required readings for the freshman year with a history piece. So one of the required readings for the freshman year is Lord of the Flies. So we combined that with political philosophy. Lord of the Flies isn't actually that high of a Lexile level. These are kids who placed into this class through teacher recommendations or their reading scores. So we wanted to make sure we got the extra challenge. Obviously, political philosophy is very high Lexile level, up in the 1600s. So that's kind of where we started, from the basis that we wanted it to be a combination of those two things. For formative assessments, basically they read the book. We analyzed the themes, the symbols. They did discussion questions every night. We had a discussion every day in class. They took reading quizzes. So that was most of what we did with the book. Then we also did, they created their own country. So, and they got to decide what government their country would have. And they created a website for their country. And every day we would come into class, there would be a global disaster or something happy. One day there was world peace and everyone gained points. This was actually the kids' favorite part of the unit because, so like, okay, they would come into class and there was a tsunami. They had picked the characteristics of their country. So if they had like a strong medical system, they earned points. It was it's a really complicated point game system. So they had their website that they created with their whole country, and then every day we came in and did these global simulations where they discussed basically government through the eyes of their country, combining that with what they were reading in Lord of the Flies. Then the final assessment was they had to finish their country and develop all the parts of their government. They had to have allies, they had to have enemies, they had to have the basic core of their country. And then they also wrote a paper. There were 3 choices for the paper topic. How does Lord of the Flies prove that society does or does not need a government? Be specific using the governmental philosophy learned in class. How would the government you created for your country have changed the outcome of Lord of the Flies? So for instance, one student had an anarchist government for their country, which that one was a little tricky because Lord of the Flies is basically anarchy. But take a new government and implant it into Lord of the Flies and talk about how it would have been the same or different. And then the third choice was, how does Lord of the Flies reflect the philosophies of Locke and Hawke? So all of them really required them to take the knowledge they had learned and apply it in a novel situation through writing. So a couple of things that I wanted to mention. The rubric that we used to grade this essay, I have since found out is a senior level rubric, and there's another one for freshman level. So we only had 1 A after when they turned their papers in the first time. And so we had to have a lot of conversations with kids who have never gotten anything but A's. So the students did revision after revision. Like I think most of them did 3 revisions to get to the papers that you're going to read. Those are after several revisions. So I feel like the rubric was too hard. It was just too hard for freshmen. Although they worked through it and they revised and revised till they got to where they felt like they wanted to be. I don't know, did I miss anything that you guys would want to know? It's hard to know what to say in Proverbs 7.
Clarifying questions?
Is that rubric available in these materials?
It's in the folder that I shared with everyone. I'm not sure. And people outside the fishbowl aspect?
So this was the summative assessment.
Yeah, there were basically 2 summative assessments, the paper and then the global simulation. That was really formative and summative because they worked on it every day. But then there was also a final day where we had a winner, a person who won the global battle, if you want to call it. Although the boys wanted me to go much further. They did not like that we did not have nuclear weapons. They did not like that we didn't have full-out war. And they wanted this to continue all year. So they got really, really, really into the country simulations.
Any other clarifying questions?
When you mentioned the rubric, it is the school-wide writing rubric?
Yes, we used the school-wide writing rubric to grade their papers. And it was the first time either of us had used that rubric. And the freshmen had never seen that rubric before, so it was new to all of us.
Any other questions? All right, well, the next portion is an analysis of the teacher work. And I believe we're using the stipend rubric.
This one?
It's called Rubric for the Unit of Study. And should we walk through it by heading?
Sure.
Composition. Does the unit include at least one of the following? Measures for teacher reflection and lesson adjustment? Or does it allow flexibility for different student needs related to the time frame and the assessment task? What do people think? We've read a lot more systematic written cover sheet for her unit. I trust we've all read that.
Yes. Yeah.
What do people think?
So,
I'm just reading the rubric, sorry, John, I'm trying to not
so
answer
you're
your
just,
question.
you're just talking about the composition part, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, didn't she say, let me get this clear in my head, that kids could revise?
Yeah.
So there was room for revision. So I'm assuming, I didn't ask this as a clarifying question, if they conferenced to find out how they could improve their essay.
Well, we could do this bullet by bullet in the meets the standard column. Maybe that's
Yeah,
an easier
that's
way
what
to
I'm
do
doing
it.
in my head.
Okay. Was there a summative assignment sheet and rubric?
Yeah.
There was. Were there formative assessments with rubrics if applicable?
There were definitely formative assessments.
Sounds like there were.
I think there were some of them had rubrics, right? The part that related to the simulation had a rubric. Did you ever?
Even the daily discussion counts to
Yeah,
me as
yeah,
a
yeah,
daily assessment,
absolutely.
whether the book's been read and whether they're getting it.
I think there were quizzes too for each
Yeah.
week.
Texts and resources.
Yeah, yeah.
She supplied a list of what they've used.
Yeah, and I liked that you included the Laxiles. Like that.
And a schedule of lessons and activities.
Yeah. And there was a link to that. Yeah. The lesson plans are there. Yep.
So for the purposes of our day here, has she met the standard?
Yes.
Okay. Differentiation. Some assessments and assignments within the unit allow students choices.
Yes.
Choice of
There were
essay topic.
three choices of essay topics.
Choice of country, choice
Choice
of
of
government
country, right.
style.
Yeah.
Uh,
Kids really had a say in designing and things, so I think.
So I think, do we agree she could be met?
I think it's
Okay.
neat. Yeah.
Alignments aligned to the Common Core.
Oh, yeah.
She showed lots of Common Core in the beginning of this cover sheet. It was a couple pages.
It was quite
Different standards
impressive.
that were being addressed.
Yes.
So, depth of knowledge. We're supposed to think about that with webs.
We definitely got to the design level here with the design your own country. Yeah. Applying concepts
I
of
think
government.
we agreed as a committee that
Yes.
a lot of 3 and 4 is happening.
Yeah, I would agree.
We definitely meet the standard. And words on that web that I see that are clearly there are create,
Analyze.
analyze, synthesize,
Apply, design,
critique, revise, assess,
yeah,
Apply concepts.
compare,
apply concepts.
investigate. Even just from listening to her kids work on that, they were really investigating different, like, doing tons of research and having a lot of fun thinking about it.
I think there's also a mix of 1s and 2s, which I think allows for differentiation, so.
Well, and I think it was a good scaffolding to help, especially if these were 9th graders building up to this, like, it's a good scaffolding to help them get to those 3s and 4s.
So, and were the rubrics aligned to the Common Core? almost religious about not only putting in little numbers and dots, but the full explanation of what they were. Aligned to the assignment. Clear and objective. And she did indeed use that the Noble High School Common Rubric format. Like a lot of us, she used the wrong one. But the harder one.
Yeah, I'd rather use the harder one than the easier one.
And I know. Yeah.
What is people's pleasure? Do you need to talk more about this teacher work, or do we find that it meets the standard according to this unit of study rubric?
I think it meets the standard.
At least, yeah.
I do too. I think it's
Might even exceed the standard.
extraordinary work.
Certainly in some cases.
The difficulty of Hobbes and
Yes.
Locke,
Yes.
that's collegiate difficulty. And next to Lord of the Flies, which is really a good, easy read, I think it's amazing.
I wonder, I'd love maybe in the debrief to be able to ask Janice how she felt, how using the writing rubric to grade this felt, and if she felt like it was an accurate an effective way to grade this assignment, or did she feel like there were things that she wanted to add or things that were missing? Because I just wonder how it feels to apply that school-wide writing rubric to an assignment that's big like this in a social
I
studies
think
class.
that's going to be part of our debrief.
Okay,
At
great.
the end.
Yep.
I think it should be. You're right. Is there any other evaluation you want to say or offer on the teacher work? If not, we'll move on to the student. The rubric says analysis of student work, 17 to 22 minutes. And those numbers were designed, I think, because we thought we'd have to read the student work right
Yeah.
here. But we've all read those sample essays electronically and have come prepared. So do you want to reduce the number of minutes we're going to allow there?
Yep.
To what?
Do we want 15 minutes? Is that enough, or is it 10 minutes? We've got 17 to 22.
Can we say 15 and we'll reevaluate at 15?
Okay.
Yes.
See how we feel? Okay. And how would you like to talk about the student work? Paper by paper, or make comments naming things that you see in the work? Or any other idea you want to
Yeah.
throw out?
I wonder if we go through paper by paper. That way we'll all make sure we're on the same.
Is that, can I ask the question, is our goal to, what's our goal when we look at the work again? Is it to articulate what we think the paper should get as a score, or is it to see if it aligns with the
I would love to
With
have
the
a
school
hard
rubric.
copy of
Yeah.
that writing rubric.
With the school
Can you print
rubric.
one? I do have. I looked for one and I couldn't find it on here.
Oh,
I can
The
just,
writing rubric.
Can you
share one.
share one?
That would
Can
be
you share it
great.
with me too? Jen?
Yeah, I don't think that's in
It wasn't in your folder. I mean, I know it's other places, but I just didn't hunt for
It's
it.
in there.
So did I hear you want to look at paper by paper?
Yeah.
And we're comparing it to the rubric you used
Yeah.
to hold students accountable, and which we think is the common rubric for the whole school.
I wonder. So we'll use the one you used and then,
To start with, it is.
yeah.
It's the senior one you're going
It's
to
the
share
senior
with
one
us?
instead of the freshman one. Those poor freshmen.
It
builds character.
It makes them stronger.
So you're going to
I'm looking on it, yeah. I can't print, from here.
I can quickly print them if you want.
The rubric. Why don't you print 20?
I love the fact that James actually.
If you're looking for the NHS writing rubric,
Yeah.
I just added it to the, right below the student work online.
And it should also check, if you check your email, it should have it shared.
Okay, we have papers labeled A through F. Do you want to go through them, A, B, C, D, E, F? How do you want to do them?
Okay.
So everybody can get paper A up?
So are we all set with the rubric, or should I continue
Well,
on
I'm
with that job?
trying to
would
get us
still love a
started.
hard,
over.
I would, yeah.
Okay.
I can print if you can't.
All right, so I'll pull out those.
Thanks, Jan.
Precious.
I have it up if you need to search, Josh.
I did that yesterday, it didn't work. Jane, can you send it to me? Right.
Okay, well, we can go two ways here. We can talk about what we see in the work, or we can talk about the bullets on the rubric and whether or not those are in the essay that we're looking at. Seems like the same talk, but in different directions. What's going to work better?
My brain likes to look at the rubric, compare it to the work. I feel like if I start with the work, I might miss elements of the rubric, but I can go either way.
Different lengths, types, rhythms of sentences. Was it engaging?
It was very readable,
Okay.
very easy to understand, but what I appreciated about it was that it was complex and easy to understand.
Right. It wasn't overly wordy.
The last two bullets are all about argumentation, claims, and evidence and reasoning. Was there a central claim? Was it
Well defended, well,
developed?
yep.
So it sounds like paper A clearly met,
Yes.
not exceeded.
Yes.
Go to paper B.
I read ahead, I'm sorry.
Functioning as our.
This one didn't say which question they were answering, so it took a little more thought
Yes.
for
Yeah.
me. But I think it's the Lord of the Flies question, what it proves about government.
Wait, what?
Read the question you think it answers, John.
The first one about what Lord of the Flies seems to be saying about.
Lord of the
need
Flies
for
proves that
government.
society does need a government, because in a state of nature which does not have a government, people would kill each other. That's,
So if we went to,
Other observations about paper B?
I think it felt like there was like, it was,
I thought the writer was working very hard at transitional words, not quite finding the right ones.
yeah.
But clearly meeting a standard. They're not incorrect, they just sound a little more formal
It's not
and
as
important
smooth.
than maybe they need to. But I didn't have a problem with the argument and its fulfillment with this paper. Did anyone else? So it sounds to me like paper B met, at least met, possibly exceeded the meet standards on that rubric.
in some places.
In some
Right.
places,
I would say like partially exceeded too.
Yeah, that's what I wrote. too.
Okay, paper C. How are we doing on time?
We've got about 5 for the 15 minutes.
This is hard, that was hard to do.
Would Otto Piper, William Gagner, Michaela Urinia, and Joe Fraser please come to the front office?
Yeah.
So what do people think?
See, Heidi Amy Brain thinks it's a little bit rougher language-wise.
And
Okay.
vocabulary and bounces around
Yeah,
more.
it's just
So-
not as smooth and fluid. Fluid?
For a freshman, does it meet?
I think it meets the
yeah,
standard
yeah.
for a
The standard.
freshman. And again, based on this rubric, it says vocabulary is precise and appropriate, tone is appropriate to the assignment.
Denise,
Yeah.
There's a really good effort to make the vocabulary.
Yeah, there's some reach there. It's kind of.
Yeah.
Vocabulary is
Yeah.
sometimes appropriate, I think, is more.
Yeah. I did that. I just responded to, there was just caught my eye.
And I was also, that paper was using hops, trying to use the hard stuff
Yep.
rather than stay in the simple story of the book, which I give some credit to in my brain. So are we agreed that C met?
It's just like rough and weird.
Well, the transitions in and out of the quotes are, yeah, tend to be a little rocky, but I appreciate that, they use direct quotes frequently and really tried to make those connections.
Well, there is, I think, and for me, a meets on this level is, there is an attempt to make that transition. This quote shows it's inelegant.
Right.
And I think
Right.
that meeting isn't necessarily elegant.
Right.
It's
Being there.
being there, yeah.
This is like solid, like more in the, it's less moving up towards the exceeds range, like if we thought about the continuum, more like in the dead center of meets, does not meets kind of thing. There's room for growth in this writing for this one.
Claim is supported with sufficient facts, extended definitions, concrete details, and quotes. I think it does that.
Yeah.
The writer explains the relationship between each quote or piece of evidence and the central claim. Do you feel like the paragraphs connect back to the sort of overall thesis of the paper? This is a stretch. We are not English teachers. We're stretching here. Together, we're not even an English teacher.
We are analyzing the blood spilling. Was it type A?
It's not a handicap thing.
It was
that- It sounds to me like you're agreeing that
Yes.
it hasn't exceeded as much as the other ones.
Yes, I think that's what I was trying to
Okay.
say.
Yeah.
I wrote that.
Let's go to paper D, please.
And we're at almost 10 after, which is just a quarter after, because, I don't know, we went with less time, so we may want to take the more time.
This is the paper that really is pretty thoroughly talking about particular characters and how they
Yeah.
basically act out Hobbes and Locke and demonstrate their theories.
Really good, strong
This one's well
language
written
in
too.
here.
Yeah.
Any problems with any of the things? The organization is there, yes.
Well done.
Yeah.
Vocabulary, claimed author,
I love the use of narcissist.
ragtag democracy, some style
Yeah.
Yeah.
points for this.
Yeah.
Varied syntax.
Yeah.
And the argumentation, is there a problem with it?
No,
No.
this is clearly exceeding
Okay, so
mine.
we all agree that it exceeds probably a
Yes.
meet standard?
Yeah.
All right, let's go to paper E, please.
Wait a minute.
Oh, where are you going?
I have no idea.
Janice is totally regretting having this become this.
I'm letting it sit together.
I like the first sentence.
I know,
Government has been around for a long time.
Like sand studio.
I mean, this
Felt
is,
like this one was a little,
this is the concrete thinker. At
Yeah.
the beginning of the book, this head was true. In the
Right.
middle of the book,
So
this
wait a
was
minute.
true. At the end of the book,
so what is the claim? The book proves that society needs government employees. Without a government, everything runs smoothly. Without it, we kill each other.
Without it, we kill each other. Okay.
You know, it does have organization.
They need none of it. Yeah, there's like some
You know,
things in here though that, what?
talks about the conch,
Yeah.
some symbolism.
Yeah, he clearly understood some concepts from the book and is applying them in this writing. It's just not as artful as the other previous ones.
And
I
it
had
does,
a hard time with this one,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
to figure out
Yeah.
where, you know, what the score should be. There's only one that stumped me.
the last sentence amused me. Next time someone doesn't want any rules, remember Lord of the Flies. There's some voice there,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and I think he still makes an argument, or she. And it would meet for me.
It's interesting. It tends to be a little more concrete, sequential, like retelling of the book, and then this happens, and then at the end of the book, this happens. So I wonder.
I think this is one of those scenarios where if Heidi and I were co-teaching, she would tell me I was being too harsh on the paper.
Well, no, I don't know that you would be being too harsh, because I think it goes back to what's the intention and how well. I think it's clear that the kid, when I read this, it's clear to me that the kid read the book,
Yes.
Lord of the Flies, and understood it, learned some things, thought about governmental forms. Not sure that I see much evidence of Locke and Hobbes
And blending.
Right.
coming in and be able to cross-apply those.
But would you not go to meets?
I might
If
not.
I had the freshman rubric, I might.
I don't know that
Let
I
me
would.
see. Evidence and- It's hard, I mean, I think I can go to meets in the evidence and reasoning because they do explain the relationship between the quotes they used. My issue is more with, did the paper meet the assignment? And I don't know that that comes through in this writing rubric necessarily. And that goes back to my original question for Janice about using the writing rubric solely for this assignment. Is it just about the writing, or is there a conceptual piece around being able to take the philosophers and compare them? Is the conceptual evidence there that she wants to see? And that's what I'm not sure we can tell from this rubric. We might be able to get to meets on the writing, and I'm okay with that, but I still have that question.
Right, does,
Well-
are the concepts understood enough for a meets?
It doesn't
Is what
really
you're
answer
asking.
the piece of the prompt that says, be specific using the governmental philosophy learned in
Right.
class.
Right.
And that-
And so on that issue, whether or not it answers the question fully is
Yeah.
reasonable.
Yeah.
Um,
You know, they form a social contract, I like that. And in that social contract, they use a conch shell as one of the laws all the boys had to follow. And then, you know, there's a quote. You know, it's clunky in the way that it's presented, but there is this notion of some things that you need to have in order to organize yourself in the government. But you're right, do exploring those deeper concepts. Does this demonstrate an understanding of that?
you know, at the bottom of page 2, at the end of the book, the government completely collapses, crashes. There is no form of government anymore. So at least it's thinking about government,
Absolutely.
but not being specific about it.
Right.
But I think, like what Jane just said, I think I'm getting lost with the clunkiness of the paper that it's, yeah, that's what's,
So are we in an area where an English teacher would be satisfied and a history, social studies teacher might not be?
That's what
And
I
a
wonder.
science teacher
That was
might
the
not be.
problem that I was having.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was the only one that
Yeah.
I had trouble.
Okay, can we look at F? Keep moving here.
This is a different, oh, yeah.
Someone else wants to.
Yeah, go.
There were real lapses in clarity
Yeah.
in this paper from the get-go.
Yeah.
Where, first of all, an anarchy-monarchy government is problematic to start with.
Yes.
And it continues. What amazed me was the sort of the correctness and the spelling and the accuracy of the little details in this paper when the bigger thinking had such holes in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So where are we on the rubric?
Well,
That
that's
makes
what-
it
I like
challenging,
the-
doesn't it?
I do, I
That's
like how
the-
it's like
that's
dashed
where
throughout the whole
gets
thing.
back to
Mark,
Patty's
can't say
issue.
Mark.
I was waiting for him to explain how they were different and.
Right, no, they're the same.
Well, let's try and use the rubric. Do mechanical errors interrupt the reader or make the piece hard to understand? I think yes, a lot of the sentencing issues are,
Yeah.
like, the sentences are blurred together, and the sense kind of gets lost.
They're kind of
places.
run-on-ish and, yeah.
So I would be on the does not meet side of that. In this particular
I
case, I
can
think.
support that, yeah.
Effective introduction, transitions that link sections, a conclusion that follows and supports.
I think I got lost in the introduction
Yeah,
right from
I
the
did
very
too.
beginning when there's a dash and keep waiting for it right there, like,
So, to explain what he's doing there with that?
right, and,
It ran,
yep.
The later paragraphs, each one has an intention.
Yeah.
They're not very clearly linked back to what doesn't exist in the first paragraph.
Right.
So either the piece lacks an introduction or conclusion, has no transitions between paragraphs, or the piece has an effective introduction, transitions that link, and a conclusion that follows. Which column are we in?
Well, I don't think it has an effective introduction.
Right, so then it becomes hard to link back to it
Yeah.
because it's
Right.
not there.
I don't enjoy when you start
So,
like, finally.
And it doesn't have a clear claim to it.
Jane, what do you think?
I
Does not meet
Does not
Yeah.
meet.
It's
Okay.
the same goal.
In terms of vocabulary and tone,
Well, could you,
Well-
sorry to keep going back to, but can you say that there's appropriate use of vocabulary for blending two terms that
Aren't the same.
aren't the same? And then not always,
an anarchy-monarchy government, I never heard of.
right, that's what I
Right,
mean, like,
that's
can you
what's so
say that
confusing.
there's
So I think
appropriate
there's
use
a
of
lack
voc-
of control of those words.
Yes.
Understanding.
So I would say,
This is interesting because here he separates them.
right,
This would mean
I suppose some of the monarchies were sort of anarchic.
anarchies.
For this assignment,
maybe there was a unique assignment that the history teacher did in this class that we don't understand.
for this assignment, are we agreeing there is not mastery of the key
Yes.
Yeah.
vocabulary?
Yeah,
Okay, so we're in the does not meet column again.
yeah.
Stylistically,
I'm in the does not use based on that first bullet. And
sentences are generally short and choppy.
it's not that they're short and choppy in some places, they're actually too long and not choppy
Right.
enough in some
Yeah,
places.
they detract from the meaning because
Yeah.
they're structured poorly.
Because you're trying to figure out what he's trying to say.
Right.
Okay. And then finally, in the argumentation bullets, the claim,
It's not clear.
it's not understandable or does not address all parts of the assignment. And then evidence and reasoning, there are not sufficient facts or examples to support the claim. The quotes and examples chosen connect poorly with the prompt. The writer does not explain the
He
relationship
repeats
between each
quotes,
quote.
There's a repetitive.
I mean, I think there's an attempt to use quotes as evidence, but I think because the claim is so unclear, it's hard to sort of buy that argument, I guess, is where I would break down there.
So I'm hearing that as a group, we think this is a does not meet yet paper. Any other comments you want to make about any of the papers? If not, maybe we should move on.
Yeah, we're at about 21 minutes.
Concluding findings, we have 2 minutes.
Focused here.
I would say that these are, knowing that these are ninth graders, really impressive. Even the does not meet is still an impressive step for ninth graders to meet here, and that the whole unit in general really challenged her kids to dig deeper and think more about Lord of the Flies than I've seen happen in a traditional ninth grade.
Yeah,
reading class
and the
would be.
evidence is in the papers.
Yes.
It really is.
Well, and likewise, I think that the level, the quality of writing that these kids were able to produce in your social studies class provides ample evidence that Common Core standards can be successfully well met in science and social studies and in areas outside of our English classrooms. I mean, these are papers I would expect to see in your class, you know.
Right, no, I think that the mechanism by which we are evaluating them still needs some work.
Yeah.
And I think that we have some work to get to clarify what we really care about assessing and whether or not the tool we're using to evaluate is actually doing that. You know, it's a
Right.
validity check here.
Me too.
That's what I think. I think that in the writing rubric, there's a content piece that's lacking in here. And as like a science teacher, I would find this very challenging to use because they might have like stylistically but there's that meat behind it of like, okay, you produced a really pretty paper, but
Well, and it's even well written, and you use
Right.
language well, and
Use
you're
quotes.
organized, and you can do in-text citation and all that stuff we want, and that's great. But if I were you, Janice, I would want to have a place to say, you know, the sort of conceptual takeaway for my kids is, have they demonstrated an understanding of different forms of government, and they been
Right.
able to apply that understanding to the piece of literature? Have they been able to make that crosswalk? And there's nowhere in this rubric that we can assess that, and that's what I want that additionally to this.
because it's very clear that's how her unit was set up, that's where she wanted to get her kids to. Right.
And it's an appropriate and lofty goal for freshman social studies, and it should be reflected somehow in the way that this assignment is assessed.
That's not on Janice because
No.
we
No, it's
all-
not on Janice at all.
We all are
I'm just,
using this rubric
Right.
in different
Right,
ways that it's
yeah.
not working well.
I think that
Yeah.
So-
given in the context of what she produced was amazing, and I'm betting that was probably, I didn't get to do clarifying questions, but that was probably a gap that she was feeling in there.
So Janice, it's your turn to talk for 5 minutes.
did such a good job, Dane.
I know, it was so hard. Well, it was really interesting to hear you guys talk about the papers. Do you want to know what we graded them? Is that what well, Jessie, paper A, that was her first write. She's the only one who didn't do a rewrite, and she's the only A we gave. Paper A, I mean, she is just like phenomenal. All of the rest of these papers, the ones you saw, are after 4 rewrites. I think that well, except for the paper that you said was an NM, it was an NM even after rewrites. Like, we could never get it to meets. Like, no matter what we did, it was not getting to meets on this. Partly because I don't know what an anarchy monarchy is, although it's been explained to me many times. I still don't understand. That's what he made his country. His country was an anarchy monarchy. And that's where that came from.
King of Chaos.
Yeah, I mean, he's a kid that is going to do what he's going to do, and it doesn't matter what you say, he's going to do what he thinks is right. So we just agreed to disagree that this paper could never get it could get to meets, we did not get it to meets. All the ones in the middle, I think their final grade was probably a little bit inflated because by then we were really annoyed with the rubric and they had done 4 rewrites and they're freshmen and we had pushed them as far as we could push them. So paper B was still at a C after rewrites. Paper B and D especially, I think the final grades are a little bit inflated because I could see what you guys were saying, but we have them at like B pluses. They probably still were lower than that, but they're freshmen and we had like worked them to the bone. And we were tired of grading more than flies papers because we've read all these papers, this many times. I do think the content piece is missing in the rubric. I don't think it's an appropriate rubric for freshmen. They don't know how to use quote incorporations. So as they were writing this paper, we taught them how to use MLA format. We taught them how to incorporate quotes. Adina had a 30-slide presentation on how to write academic papers. This is all new to them.
And they did amazingly well for their
So
first try.
it was,
I mean, even the paper that didn't meet, there was
Yeah.
some evidence that learning happened in
Yeah.
those areas, for
Yeah.
sure.
the one paper E, where you guys were saying about be specific using government philosophy, like, I think that is the part where the content was missing. She did use some, I just didn't tell you that, like, the social contract we did a whole class lesson on, and anarchy was one of our vocab words. So she definitely, like, used it. Was it to the meets level? I don't know, I'll keep thinking about that. But that was missing from the rubric, definitely. But I think the rubric is too hard for freshmen. They almost have to be perfect.
So are you saying E was a C? Meets?
E was, well, see, that's where I think it was inflated, because after her 4th rewrite, she was at a B. Her first draft was in an M, and she rewrote it all these times. But you can see, like, where we started, like, the first time we graded these papers, like, this is what they all looked like. It was just, the rubric is hard. It's hard. They almost have to be perfect to get to an A.
Now, have you gone back and tried to apply the freshman level rubric? to
I've
these
never
papers?
seen the freshman level rubric. I asked
You
for it.
haven't?
I found out it existed last week, and I asked for it, and I
Will you, do you think you will go back, or will you continue to work since they've already been exposed to this?
well, I'm never going to tell them that this wasn't the right rubric.
Right, that's what I'm wondering,
Because
yeah.
they'll
like-
murder me. They will murder me. I think I might tell them that we tried this on them and we realized how hard it was for them, even though they worked so hard, and that we're going to try out a new rubric that maybe, but, I mean, it does prove that with work, they can, almost every kid but this one ended up passing. But do you want to do 4 drafts of every paper that you do? And we have decided to do a different performance assessment for each unit. So now they just wrote a piece of journalism, which was totally different. And we just didn't use the rubric to grade that. Like, it didn't match journalism.
Did you get feedback from them on the rubric? Like what they,
They struggled. I mean, they struggled to understand, like, they just don't know. Like, they didn't know how to do MLA. They didn't know how to incorporate quotes. They didn't know, like, and it's funny, you guys, like, describe the students that wrote the papers to a T, like, logical thinker, like, lofty thinker, awkward kid trying to use great vocabulary. Like, that's those kids. I don't know. It would be interesting to give them another paper to see how they do with the rubric on the first try. I just don't feel like it's appropriate for freshmen. And these are our most advanced freshmen.
right.
Well, I was going to say, the one thing that comes through listening to you talk and reading their writing is, I know one of your goals for that course was to really push these kids, and you did.
Yeah, oh yeah, and they tell us that every day. They're like, we didn't know what you meant by challenge. They were like, they think we push them too hard, but then they come back and do it, you know.
If it's any consolation to you, I graded the papers at home yesterday.
Yeah.
And my grades are exactly yours.
Oh, awesome.
That's great.
And I
Okay.
think that's what's supposed to happen
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
in general.
yeah.
How about a general debrief when we're done? I think debrief of the process. And I'll invite our spectators to speak if you want. How do you think it went? Committee?
I have some questions, I guess they're more like probing questions. And I can write them down and you could think about them. But is this process designed to improve learning, is that the reason for this process? What's the reason? What's the purpose?
The reason is we need to be able to tell people that we look at what our students do, and we know that all of it is addressing the standards we say we're teaching. And this is 5 or 6 teachers looking at one teacher's work, really kind of assessing what's being taught and what work is produced by it, to kind of make sure that as a school, we're all on the same page.
Okay,
And I
so
would
it's
say-
not a process that's designed to impact or change learning. It's a process that's designed, focused on teaching, again, being on the same page around teaching.
Yes, especially around common assessment.
Well, I think that it's a muddy distinction because it's about assessment and it's about a formative process of assessment where, I mean, the value in this work there's many, but one piece for me is that, you know, the group of us are able to sit around and talk about the levels of quality that we expect, and that we hope that each of us go back to our own classrooms and have the same expectations around levels of quality for our kids. And without these kinds of conversations, there's not a lot of way for us to know that.
So, you know, you've only got so much time, and with the teacher time you have, do you, and I don't know the answer to this, is it best spent on the standardization of expectations, or is it best spent focused on learning, looking at learning? What I was wondering about was why the looking at student work piece with something like describing student work and doing rounds didn't come first.
As opposed to her explaining the assignment
and
first.
in one, so, you know, that's my big question. Is this meant to standardize? It means doing that in terms of expectation, but is it impacting the learning? And when you've only so much time, how do you want to spend your teacher time? Do you want to spend some of it on standardization and some of it learning focused? Or how do you want to spend your time? You're spending a lot of effort getting all on the same page about things, and that's one thing you can do, but how is that impacting learning? Janice, you said that student, he said he's not going to do, he's going to do what he's going to do regardless of what I say. So is this a process that's helping you help him improve his work, even if his work is never going to look like what you want it,
Well, his work did improve,
standard
like,
is?
drastically. It just didn't meet the standard.
Right,
I mean, there are a lot of aspects of that work that are
yeah,
really
Yeah.
as good as my seniors do.
yeah.
So I think, to answer your question, I think both things have to happen at the same time. I mean, we need to know, especially if we're going to agree on common assessments at grade levels, we need to know what people are doing and how they're doing it, so that kids are all going to meet the same standard. And eventually, it's about the student work. But at
we're
the
not
beginning
there yet.
especially, I think it's going to be very quick to sort of ratify the unit. And it was quick here.
It was, but I mean, I think that we've developed, and this is not just here at the high school, but this is K-12 for us, a set of sort of expectations around, you know, what we would expect from a unit, a well-planned unit,
Yeah.
that it's, you know, that it's
Yeah.
backwards
Yeah,
planned
I
and the
see
standards
that.
are clearly defined, and that's something that's part of our professional development right now, is
Yeah.
making sure that all teachers understand those components
Yeah.
and how to use them to improve instruction.
And I guess I'm questioning the amount of time, spent on that as opposed to spent on looking at learning, looking at student work.
Well, and I would say, I mean,
Adjusting
this was,
practice based on what you're seeing rather than trying to fit what you see to a standardized formula.
and this was unique because Janice was ready with both aspects of this, with her, her unit and her kids' work, because I think that, like John was saying, it's kind of muddied and it has to happen at the same time. But what I think would be also beneficial, which I'm assuming is going to happen for our group, is a teacher's going to bring the unit before they even have the student work, so that way the unit is as tuned and as good as it can be, so that the learning can then be be the focus and be beneficial to the kids, as opposed to going through a process and then looking back and going, you know, you sort of just wasted your kid's time, or it didn't come out the way you wanted it to, so, and knowing Janice, I know that she revised and did this work in her head anyway, but I think that it's nice that we've designed this, that we can do this either way. We can look at just teacher work first, and then Janice could come back to the table with her work, and after she's gotten our feedback and her student work, or we can do what we've done here and tune the whole thing together. But I think it is really important that the idea is both of those things have to happen. We have to look at the teacher work and then the student work. It's how and when that they happen could change.
So given your objectives for what, I mean, Margaret's sort of laid a whole other layer on it, and maybe even flipped it on its head by saying focus on the learning instead of on the instruction. But going back to your purpose, for what you wanted to accomplish, did you accomplish, do you feel you accomplished your goal? How was the process? And just, I've got a three-part question.
Okay, oh, great, I'll write it down.
Overarching goals, did you meet them? How did the process of getting to meeting those goals feel? And what might you do the next time differently if the process wasn't perfect?
Speaking as the facilitator, I feel like I was winging it. And until we decided to get into this meets column on the rubric and really look at each paper, I felt like it was all opinion sitting there.
Well, and this is the thing I was going to talk about too, John, is like I've done these work calibrations several times using different protocols, and I've not yet found one that felt really comfortable. Every time I've done this, I felt like, the right way to do this? Like, I've done some where everybody grades on their own and we all report our grades and then we argue about why. I've done them more like this where it's more holistic and we just talk about kind of where we think the kid falls on the rubric and it's more of like an open discussion. And I guess I don't know the right answer because I feel like the goal is for us to walk away knowing that this is a meets paper for all of us. And I'm just not sure how we know when we're at that point.
I think we're learning through this process, and when we have common assessments and units sitting out there at grade level, then we'll be able to just bring lots of student work, lots of meets papers and lots of papers, and then focus on those more particularly, and really tune ourselves the way we would if we were grading SAT.
Well, and I was going to say, I think that tuning will be beneficial too because then it'll be like if Janice and I are on opposite teams or different teams coming together and making sure that we're on the same page with things. Whereas this was obviously they co-teach, they co-grade and everything, but keeping us to calibrate us to make sure that we've designed a unit and we're looking at the same expectations as they're going through it.
It's interesting because we're asking the students to do things that we are really struggling with in our rubric. You know, when we say precise language, I think we haven't really figured that out yet, what we really want from kids. And maybe we don't need to do that as precisely as we think we do. I don't know the answer.
So I think we're struggling with a bigger question. And this whole notion of a common rubric is a wonderful idea. Yeah. However, for different assignments, there are different line items. Right. And she needed them in social studies. I teach in creative writing in my unit. I built two that were all about details and characterization and things that I wanted to see in kids' writing. And I don't think we're in an agreement as a faculty about how much liberty we have to do that.
And I don't think we realized that part, that we could change the rubric. Like, I think that's been made clear now, but this work was all done over the summer. I don't think we knew we could change the rubric at that point, so we just used it, like, having known that, we would have added a category. I just don't think we were thinking, like, I think we were just going to try it as it was and see what happened. But now they've said you can change it and add it.
Or use two rubrics, you know, one for concepts and one for writing skills.
I guess one of the things I'm wondering about is looking at in terms of getting representative samples of student work, not everybody's, but some student work, and doing the, you know, a CAC or a looking at what do you see and mapping that against what you're looking for. So you're learning from the student work, not from this externally developed checklist of what you think you want to see, or what you maybe are expected to see, or what some external standard setter says you should see. And that is the match there, and does it tell you that, and or how would you then change your teaching based on what the student work is? That's what I'm wondering about.
I've done it that way before too.
Yeah, we've done like the Atlas protocols many
I
times.
think I find that way. For me, I find it frustrating, and I feel like it's a guessing game the whole time. Like, because we did that at the I3 thing this summer, and I found that to be highly frustrating for me personally. Like, I didn't find it productive for me.
There have been people here that have wanted to say something.
Okay. I was just thinking how, you know, you guys, I think you were kind of talking about it, you spend so much time looking at the student work, and that's the lesser piece of the money. I guess the money doesn't matter, but, you know, the larger piece is developing the unit, and since you guys don't have a ton of teachers who volunteered to take advantage of this stipend, then why are they not doing that? Is it because they don't know
This was
how,
a lot
or they
of
don't
work.
have the time?
This
Right.
was like
So
a
you spent
ridiculous
so much
amount of work.
time
Yeah.
building the unit. Why not talk more about the building of the unit and how you get that information across to the students to get them ready for writing the paper? Because if you don't get them ready well enough, the paper is not going to be good enough.
Yeah.
So I think it would be really nice to have more protocol on talking about the process of making the unit.
We are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm sure you guys
Teacher
probably have
workshop
talked
that
about it,
great.
workshops and
I'm
stuff,
gonna
but,
take my
yeah.
unit.
Maybe
Say,
just
this
when
is
I
how you
came,
get
I
$500.
expected to hear more about
These are
that.
the things you need to do. This isn't one,
Well,
Yeah.
only way to do it.
Oh, yeah.
But teachers, I mean, they've been learning how to use Chromebooks, and they've been learning how to do a lot of other things.
And I think
So-
until Josh last Thursday stood up and said, this is what a performance-based assessment, this is what our definition is that we developed as a group. Like, I think a lot of people didn't, like, I think I mentioned this yesterday, they didn't realize that they were already doing some of that stuff in their classrooms. And so now there's been this, and so actually, I think us as a group, we're in this like sort of panic mode of, oh my gosh, I think we're about to get a whole bunch of units at us. And it took us, you can see the process, I mean, it's taken us, I think we tried for 3 weeks to tune something of John's just as like a practice, and it was hard work for us, so.
And
So I
before
do
that,
think
we
that
just
focus.
But I
felt
think
like we had to
so many
define
teachers.
things for the faculty.
Right.
Not go to them winging it on, with a definition of performance assessment, and lay out something that was fairly concrete so that people could start from solid ground. I think it's going to happen by the end of the year, because teachers are always making units,